of three operating budget presentations for Woodbridge, and today is Thursday, January 23rd. Before we get into the budgets, the first item on our agenda is a review of the audit. With us for the 89th time is Scott Bassett from McGladrey and Pullen. You just want to give us some highlights, Scott?
Sure. Good evening. For the record, my name is Scott Bassett. I'm a partner with McGladrey, and we conducted the audit for the town of Woodbridge for the year ending June 30th, 2013. We issued an unmodified clean opinion on the financial statements of the town. The town received the CAFR award, which is an award that highlights financial reporting within the municipal industry, and the town received that last year, and they submitted it again this year. We also do an audit of the major programs for the federal and state programs, the grants that you received, and we also issued an unmodified clean opinion on those programs. During the course of the audit, Tony and his staff prepared trial balances and things to present to us for the audit process. We had no significant adjustments made to those trial balances, and I always mention that when I come here, because that means the information that you're getting on a regular basis is complete and accurate. So Tony and his staff do a great job there. We received complete cooperation from all the departments, including here at Town Hall and at the Board of Education, and we had no disagreements with management, and we were able to issue the clean opinion. As far as highlights, on the full accrual basis of accounting, assets exceeded liabilities by $58 million. That takes into account all your infrastructure assets, all your capital assets and buildings within the town, and measured against your liabilities. And based on that, your assets over liabilities was $58 million. This is an increase of $670,000 from the prior year. On the modified accrual basis of accounting, the basis that you're more accustomed to talking about as you go through your budget process, the town had an unassigned fund balance of $4,811,000, or 10.6 of your general fund expenditures. Slight decrease from the prior year, but you had planned to use $400,000 of your surplus during the budget process for the year ending June 30, 2013. Your capital assets, your total assets, your infrastructure, was $72 million net of depreciation. You had total liabilities, including debt, of $31 million, and again, your net position of $58 million. The general fund had a total general fund balance of $5.9 million. Unassigned fund balance, again, was the 10.6 of general fund expenditures. A little new activity this year is your bands. You had outstanding bands of $9.5 million. Portion for the Woodbridge Country Club, and also a portion for the public facilities that is being constructed. General fund had a small increase this year of $85,000. Your tax collection rate comparable to prior years of 99.7, and your property taxes represent about 92% of your budgeted revenues. On a budgetary basis, your general fund revenues are $44.6 million, which is $219 less than expected, primarily due to one line item where the country club, I believe you had budgeted about 1.3 or 1.4, and it just came in under $1 million for those fees associated with the country club. Expenditures were $44.9 million, which are $342,000 better than expected, and there were no other significant budget to actual numbers that were, the variance was that great. I mentioned that the town has federal and state monies that come in. The town received $687,000 from the federal government and $1.2 million from the state. We noted no significant deficiencies during the course of the audit. And again, overall, the financial position of the town remains strong. Your collection rate remains strong. And all the attributes that rating agencies and folks will look at, I believe the town sits in a very good financial position.
So in other words, we're in good shape.
You're in good shape.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for Scott? We generally.
I don't have a question, but I would like to compliment Tony and his staff for the great job that got us this report.
I'm sure Scott will tell you that Woodbridge is one of his favorite accounts.
It is.
You know, it might be worth just mentioning the process of the audit.
Sure.
I remember those days. There were several people here for several days. And
Okay, Our process, it's quite a long process because we put it in pieces. Is we come in probably May or June, and we start looking at your compliance and your controls. So the part of controls that we look at obviously are payroll controls, cash disbursement controls, and tax collector controls are the three issues that we look at. And that makes up a bulk of your expenditures and your revenues. So we do that work, and we do our testing on the federal and state grants during the summertime. Then we come in probably about October 15th, and we start the financial statements. Basically, we give Tony and his staff a chance to get everything together. They present the trial balances to us. We take a download of those trial balances, and we get those into a financial statement format and conduct our audit. We're probably here with 2 or 3 people. I'd say 4 weeks. I'd say on and off for 4 weeks. Then there's some loose ends to tie up. We tie up those loose ends and issue typically the week before Christmas. So overall, it's, we spend between 500 to 600 hour man hours on the engagement to get you, the booklet and your federal and state grant. So it's a lot goes into it. It's a 130-page document, but there's a lot of underneath work that goes into it, analysis that goes into it as we go through the process. You're welcome.
Any other questions? Okay.
Andrew?
Yeah.
I just have a comment. In the last 4 years that I've sat on the board and previous, we've gone through a very, very, the economic times have been difficult. Every year for the last 4 years, this has been the way this report's come in. I think that sometimes we're very critical of what we do, and the things we do, but this is something that we all can take a lot of pride in.
Absolutely.
And our taxpayers in this town should be proud of this report, because when you look around towns around us and what is going on in the state, there aren't too many of them that have reports that look like this.
Couldn't agree with you more. Okay. Scott, thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a nice evening.
Thank you. Okay, before we get started, just some maybe housekeeping. We do have an aggressive schedule, as you can see, and we really try to stay on schedule so that people who are here get on in time. Just the way this process will work for those of us who are here for the first time. We have a meeting tonight, we have a meeting next Tuesday and the following Thursday. We had a possible meeting the following Tuesday, February 4th, but that has been, we're not going to have that. So we're just going to go with this. Once we get through and we listen to, or Tony listens to comments, questions, and whatever, he will sit down with the first selectman and put together what he considers to be a reasonable budget to present to the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen will meet, I believe, on February 25th to discuss that budget that Tony and Ellen will put together. Of course, from there, they can adjust the Board of Selectmen budget. Once that's done, the budget comes to the Board of Finance probably about exactly a week later on March 4th, and we make the final determination as to what is going to go to the annual budget hearing in April. So that is pretty much it. And then at the annual budget hearing, we listen to comments there, and we can change it. But the final word on the budget, of course, comes from the Board of Finance. But what we have found is, obviously, Tony knows this budget better than anybody, so the budget, generally speaking, that is presented to the Board of Selectmen, and once the Board of Selectmen get through with it, there's not a whole lot left. The department expenditure totals, based on what we have here, show an increase of 2.99%. And when you consider that Beecher and Amity are both up significantly, I think it's remarkable that our departments do a great job of keeping their budgets responsible. So there's not a whole lot of areas to cut, but Tony will go through all those and come up with recommendations, and then, as I said, the Board of Selectmen go from there. So as we get started with the departments, keep in mind that the revenue, there's a lot that's not final. Did we get a grand list?
Yeah, I can go through that.
Okay.
The
revenues are not finalized. Health insurance is never finalized until later in the process. So things will change from here. But Tony has some projections based on revenue, which
where
is
we are right now, yeah.
Which is where.
So,
just pass these out.
So so those of you who've been through this process before, I'm sure this is a familiar sheet, but this is our budget where we are currently, based on all of our requests. So what I mean is I'll explain how this works. There's the expenditures, total $46,745,000, which is the 2.99% increase that Matt mentioned. And then there are revenues that are non-tax revenues, total $2.7 million, $2.75 million, which gives you an amount to be raised by taxes of $43,993,791. There is no change yet in the grand list. We're still waiting to hear from some final figures from Betsy, so that will change once we get those information in. But and also there's still some work to do on revenues. The state is the biggest probably outlier there as to where we're headed with state revenue, state grant revenue, and also some insurance, as Matt suggested, both property, auto liability, workers' comp, and health insurance are all in process. But you can see that the variance to the current year budget is 6.71%. There is a change to just keep note is the country club. You'll notice that the expenditures and the revenues both go, there are no revenues, and the expenditures go way down to 259. So you can see that impact here on department charges and their country club expenditure department. We'll get into revenues. I think that's the third night. We'll get into revenues in more detail.
So again, keep in mind that these figures represent 100%
Of all requests.
All requests,
Right.
including capital. As you can see, last year's capital was
1.25.
1.25, and
Right.
the requests are almost double that. So
Right.
obviously, that's the first area to look at. So we're certainly not going to accept a 6.7% tax increase. So, but again, there's so many items in here that are going to change. And then, like I said, the Board of Selectmen will take this down and we'll go from there.
Could you just make one comment, Tony, about if the grand list goes up, what kind of impact that has?
So if the grand list goes up, it divides, brings the mill rate down because it divides the tax burden amongst more people or more value.
Right.
So it's
Okay.
like sharing a pie. You divide the pie amongst more people. So the grand list will most likely go up,
Right,
which means that should have a favorable impact on the mill rate going down.
right. Okay.
So that's a big piece that's not yet here. And I think Betsy will talk a little bit more about that tonight.
Well, historically,
She's on
over the
tonight.
past several years,
Yeah.
the grand list hasn't grown very much.
Right, and
Pretty stagnant.
She'll mention
so-
that tonight.
Yeah, yeah.
When you see her, you can ask her questions on the grand list. She'll tell you where she is so far.
Okay.
Okay, so as we bring the various departments to the table, what I generally do is ask them to give us the highlights of their budget and to mention if there's any glaring increases in any accounts. And then from there, we can ask questions. I would suggest you, if you look at the back, of course, I'm sure you already have, there are narratives on each budget which might answer your questions. So with that, we'll ask, I guess, Todd, you're gonna...
Yep. I'm just passing around the small presentation there in handout format, just so you can follow along. Have a copy for it.
And again, as you see on the budget, what we do is we give you a total budget increase or decrease, and then we remove salary from that and give you the total non-salary. So in this case, Todd's budget shows an overall 1.87% increase. But if you take out salary increases, which are contractual, of course, it's actually a reduction of 1% in all the other accounts. So, like I said, responsible budget.
Just stole my presentation there. All right, so we start with a little presentation, then we can talk about some numbers if you want in the capital and that kind of thing. Oh yeah, if you could reach that. And Susan, right behind you. If you I would say don't back up.
Also
Yeah,
enough?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, sure.
So some highlights of the library in the last year. Of course, here's some shots from our programming, mostly the summer programming that we did last year. Variety of things going on in the library. Here's some accomplishments from last year. We reorganized adult fiction, which means that mystery, romance, science fiction, you name it, the authors are all together now. So anything by Stephen King or John Grisham is going to all be together now by genre, which we thought was a better way for patrons to search. Of course, we did new carpeting downstairs, a lot of the downstairs first floor. We added a second ebook vendor. We did this on our own. The consortium of Lion wasn't ready to go with the second one, so we decided to purchase Access 360 a few months ago. So if you're used to Overdrive and you take ebooks out at the library and you want something that's not on there, definitely try out Access 360. It's a simple setup process, your barcode number and a password, and we have more of the bestsellers available in Access 360 than Overdrive. And you're not competing with the consortium for that, you're only competing with Woodbridge residents, so the wait is very, very short for those titles. And we'll start to purchase more of those as we go through the year. Zinio, the consortium, we did pay for 1 year, so it was no cost to Woodbridge. We bought Zinio for a year, which is 180 periodicals that you can have on any ebook device or computer. You have, let's say you want the issue of ESPN the magazine or Good Housekeeping, you can have that issue forever. You don't have to return it. You can just delete it off your device then, and eventually we'll have automatic downloads, so when the new issue comes out, you will have that automatically. We don't have it yet. That's a feature they're going to roll out soon. So you can use that unlimited. Next year we're going to evaluate with the consortium if we're going to pay for that again, or if libraries will have to individually kind of piecemeal the order like they do for Overdrive. So that's been a big hit. Spanish language section, we started for the adult for the first time, and we're going to continue to roll that out and also purchase some more juvenile Spanish language titles. A few of the numerical data that we like to look at every year is circulation per capita, which is how many items circulate per resident. And this is for the whole state of Connecticut, about 160 some libraries. We're number 7 this last fiscal year at 20.4, which is great. This is an indicator that what we have for the population is going out quite a bit. The average library is less than half of that in Connecticut, so that's a great number. Of course, the budgets at New Canaan, Darien, Westport, and Greenwich are in the millions to several $1 million. So that's a number that we like to see above 20 to 22 in the last few years. And Durham has some geographical advantages with Route 17 connecting 3 roads below it. In case you're wondering, Durham's a great little library, and they are just booming for the size library they are. Woodbridge cardholders. So how many residents in Woodbridge have cards? Just over 7,000, just under 10,000 potential. We don't have an age on cardholders here, but it's not like we have a lot of 6-month-olds with cards. Usually when they get into school, the parent brings them in or the guardian and says, you know what, let's get a card. So I don't know how many technically eligible school age and above that is, but 70% is well above the state average. It's one of the higher ones in Lyon. So we're pretty pleased with that number. That's why we call potential cardholders the other 30%. Those that we need to get the word out, or that eventually will be coming into the library to get their cards. Our circulation stats. We did start to plateau in the last year, and I expect we will again this year. Just under 190,000 items circulating. Ebooks, it's been slow, but it is definite growth that we're going to project over the next decade. In 2 years, we've doubled ebook growth, and we expect to double again in the next 2 years at least. So that is something as we start to purchase slightly less print items and other mediums, we will start to increase our ebook availability to patrons. And we're also able to now track what types of ebooks they're utilizing. And Access 360 also has ADA compliant available titles, as well as a contract with Scholastic, which is the biggest publisher of juvenile titles. So that is something else that we're going to start doing a lot of, is titles for juveniles and elementary school age children. There's a lot of data on this page. Basically why it's important to us is ILLs borrowed versus ILLs lent. The ratio is how we, a large part of how we get our state grant. We get a very nice state grant check every year. Last few years, it's been between $18,000 and $20,000, so we're hoping that continues. And that's because we have a net result of $4,043. Woodbridge residents borrow $17,656 last year from neighboring Lion libraries as well as from the state of Connecticut. However, from our collection, we lend out $4,043 more than that to other libraries in Lion and the state. And that means we have an attractive net lending collection. And so we've always hovered the last few years between 7th, 8th, 9th place. And that's something that we really rely on because that money is used for a variety of things, from programming to new shelving to new computers. So it's something we really, really need, that versatility and that funding. Programming at the library, what's going on? Every week we have these programs at the library for 0 to 5-year-olds, baby rhyme time, toddler time, read and grow story, a Saturday story craft. You can always call the library to find out what they have for a certain age. 5 to 12-year-olds, we have Tuesday evening story craft. We have a collage art, which is great. Sometimes we display the artwork in the library. Teens, teen summer reading we have now. We have a Haunted Tales every fall. We've had hip-hop dancing, poetry, fire spinning. It was not indoors. We did that on the grounds. What's next and kind of things we're looking at: a kiosk in the Cafe Teen area, as well as a healthy vending machine option. We're kind of looking at some ideas there. We asked the kids this year what they wanted to see, and it was food, food, food. So it's a nice space up there. It's a tile floor for a reason. We allow drinks and eating up there, so we're kind of looking at doing something like that in the upcoming year. Adult programming, 84 programs, 2,100 in attendance. We hit 50 to 60 with some of our programs, which is pretty much the max that room can hold. So that's always good to see. Online registration, you'll see at the bottom, is one of the things we're rolling out, and that's actually live now. If you go to our website, in the center of the page, just under the picture of the library, you can register for program e-blasts. So basically, we'll use that data, and we'll see what kind of programs you attend, and then we'll start to create lists based on what interests you might have down the road. And that way we can much better market to individuals based on their interests. Technology, of course, we have 2 ebook vendors I mentioned, Overdrive, Access 360. We have one-on-one device tutorials. If you get a Kindle or a Nook or an iPad, call the library, call the reference desk, and we can set you up with one-on-one training on how to do that, how to use our resources. Of course, Zinio, the periodical I mentioned. We just started a fax for the public. We do still get fax questions quite regularly, so we figured we could finally roll that out. We're looking at turning on, we've had wireless printing for the last year, but we haven't turned it on yet, and I think we're going to do that now and experiment with that. Do some sort of pop-up screen so that the staff can manage those so that people aren't printing like crazy unintentionally. It kind of acts as a stopgap so that they understand what they're doing and what the charges are and that sort of thing. So we're going to start rolling that out soon. Ancestry.com, genealogical database, which has been really popular. We're going to continue with that. Goals for next year. This first one, Beecher Road School, Dr. Stella and I have been in touch, and what we think we're going to try to do is a language database, both for the students at Beecher as well as patrons in the Woodbridge community. It'll be multilingual. It'll work both ways, from English to second language and second language to English. Hopefully the idea is that not only can students in the school use it, but patrons at home. It can authenticate your address, and you'll be able to access this and do language resources from your own home or office. So that's some project we're going to be working on in the next year. I'm going to see some demos for that from some other libraries in the next few weeks, and we're going to continue to work on that. Redesigning some areas of the library that we'd like to improve upon. More Facebook and Twitter presence, as well as e-newsletters. And then the children's collection. Our children's librarians are working much more with Beecher Road School for a variety of issues to kind of help the curriculum kind of parallel more what we have to work with them. New website. The library website, it's over a decade old. It served its purpose. It's okay. But we've kind of outgrown it, so now we're looking at redesigning our own website in-house. We are going to have remote access, which we don't have right now. That means that if we have a problem with a weather delay or a hurricane or you name it, We have to come into the library and use one specific computer, and we have to send a message to the server at line, and then they have to upload the data. Now, once we use a program that we're looking at, several of us will have access from anywhere, our phone, at home, it doesn't matter, and we can make changes to the website live remotely. That's something we really need to kind of improve our technology and improve our kind of word of mouth, what's going on at the library. So that's something to keep an eye on next year. We'll have that hopefully done in a few months. And lastly, so what does it all mean? Compared to last year's request, it's just a 1% decrease, and I can get into some reasons to that. But that's kind of the update on what's going on at the library. So any questions on this section?
Put those lights on.
So the budget itself, a few things I wanted to point out. On the first page, automation 52,213. We're projecting a decrease of 1,500 this year, and that actually might decrease again next year. In our consortium, we just added Bethany Library, and we are adding Hamden in hopefully June or July. As we add libraries, especially large ones like Hamden, the percentage of the pie that we have to pay decreases because it's more spread out. So I expect that number to keep coming down, despite the fact that we added a port, and this port ran 3250. And what a port is that's another library computer that ties into our integrated library system, so that we can do cataloging, we can access the resources, the database. We needed more help in our technical services department, another computer that could kind of keep our cataloging up to date. So despite that, we still went down in that area. We did some shuffling with our staffing groupings. You'll see in clerical and part-time all other. It was a little bit confusing before. I had full-timers and part-timers in two different line items. And so it made staffing and filling in and trying to keep them, the line items kind of together a little bit difficult. So Karen and I worked on kind of rearranging and putting the full-timers in one line item and the part-timers in another, which gives me a lot more flexibility for future staffing needs. So that's, if you see that kind of created and one disappeared, I mentioned that in my letter. Anything else of note? Subscriptions, we took a little bit of a decrease, $1,000. Again, with Zinio online, we're kind of moving away from as many print periodicals, so I would imagine this number is going to continue to decrease over the next few years. That's 55,310. Print periodicals, magazines just aren't quite moving like they used to, and I don't foresee that changing, so we'll continue to go to the online digital and see how that improves. And of course, gas has been a big savings. I'm sure that number will decrease again. I'm not sure where we are with the numbers for that, but that's been a big help.
Do you want to comment on maybe about computer and what the change in strategy is about?
Oh, for the new line item?
Yeah.
Yeah, 55,111. Yeah, as I had mentioned, how many computers we replaced, over 12 PCs, 5 printers, some iPads, things like that. The wear and tear in our computers is enormous at the library, with all the visits we have, the usage, not only with the staff, but with the public. And it's kind of becoming a line item that I think is going to grow over time, because every few years we're having to we've pretty much replaced all the computers in the last, I'd say, 4 years in the building. And so that's something that I wanted to kind of start to get in here long term, and then we can kind of evaluate as we move forward how long a computer lasts. A few of them a year line replaces as part of our consortium payment, but for the most part, most of them, that is not in our contract. So we try to stay up with the technology and give the patrons what they're expecting or what they're used to, as far as what the computers can do. Certainly some computers have a certain need for certain technology that others do not. Some are much more simplistic, depending on their usage.
On the electric building, I see that's the.
Yep.
What's the plan for the humidity problem?
We have to meet with Silver Petrocelli, I think is their name, right? We have to meet with them again. We haven't met with them in a while. They'd given us some, as I think last year, they'd given us some ideas, some kind of loose financial guidelines, but there was not really any guarantee that was comfortable, that we really thought, oh yeah, this is really going to work and this is going to be worth it. So we asked them to come up with a more comprehensive, detailed plan, which is where we have to follow up with them about to see what ideas they have long term. It's definitely seasonal. For instance, right now there's no humidity issues, of course. It's when it's rainy in the spring and fall, and definitely in the summertime is when we have the major issues, especially in certain portions of the building. So yeah, that is definitely a long-term priority. Yeah.
Any other questions for Tom? Great job, Tom. Thank you. Thank the Library Commission for it.
Yep. Do you have any capital?
Yeah,
Comments?
capital, is there much?
I only have a few things on these, the
why don't
capital.
you
Just explain what they are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Children's area carpet replacement. I have on fiscal year 16. Of course, we did a lot of the downstairs this past year, which was much needed and came out really well. The children's area, it's a little bit more complicated because of the size, space, and the shelving orientation. So I have that projected fiscal year 16. I'm probably going to start getting quotes just so we have them in our back pocket and can kind of see down the road when we go to bid and that kind of thing. But that was one that certainly we've had on there the last few years. And then fiscal year 19, I have for $25,000 the carpeting for the main stacks, fiction, nonfiction of the library. That is a different type of carpet than we replaced this year, and that doesn't have nearly the same wear and tear as the main area of the library. So that was the second one. And then on the third one, I withdrew the self-check machine. I've kind of kept moving it back the last few years. The price is coming down, but I don't feel that we quite have the right spot for it. We added a machine in our children's area a few years ago, and that seems to be doing the job upstairs. And we have 3 downstairs terminals that patrons can check out items. So I don't feel that our size, staff, or circulation warrants another self-check machine on top of it. So down the road, if we get an amazing deal, I can look at some state grant funds or something else to purchase it, but I didn't think that it was a priority anymore. Sure, thank you.
Okay, next is tab 1210, which is the police department.
Yeah.
We should see it closely. I don't know.
Sent you out alone, huh?
Okay, Ray, you want to just give us the highlights?
Okay. First of all, I'd just like to open up with just I just want to let you know that I try to do a very thorough preparation of the budget. And in doing so, I think it's me working as close as I do with Tony to try to accomplish the needs of the department. And what I'd like to start is I'd like to move right down to 5430 overtime for police officers. And I want to explain that back in September or October, when I first started doing the budget, it appeared that we were using awful lot of overtime. I brought that to my board, and they were very disturbed about it. And it had to do with how we were using overtime as far as not private duty overtime, but the town overtime. And I sat down with Tony, and we came up with a solution that we could, along with him, working with Public Works, working with the overtime that we're providing for the town, that we could bring that down significantly as long as we keep a really good handle on it. And what I would like to do is I'd like to amend that particular line, bringing the 140 as projected down to 1,000 or 100,000, and then bringing my request for 100,000 for my next year's budget down to about 80. And I think we can live with that as a request. Any questions on that particular line? I also want to bring in to the attention of 5435, which is overtime for training. Present 24, projected 30. I'm requesting 35. It's becoming very expensive to train officers today, and there's an awful lot of mandates that are out there. This particular year that we're in right now, we have to have, by July 1 of this year, we have to have 10 officers certified. And it varies from year to year. Next year, it's going to be 7 officers that have to be certified, and just based on what they do, and they get certified every 3 years, and they have to have 60 hours of credit within those 3 years. And there's mandated areas. I just sat down with my lieutenant today, and we had to come up with some type of solution for mandated training that we have to have before July 1. Specifically, we just scheduled hazmat and bloodborne pathogens. That's required once a year, every year. It's a mandate by the state, so I have to have that training. So we're going to try to work it into the schedule where we're not, because our present budget, we're over already. Or I think, no, we have about $2,000 left in that $24,000 for our present budget year. So it's a problem, and we try to keep on it, but that kind of gives you an idea of what our mandates are: firearms, hazmat, bloodborne pathogens, and collect. And that's every year that we have to go through those.
Are those done in groups or online? I mean, how is the
Not
training?
online. We actually, that particular training is done right over here at the police headquarters. We bring instructors in, and we have that at training. The additional training, just last week, we sent, I believe we sent 4 officers. South Central Criminal Justice provides a week of training that brings up all the mandates that are required during that 3-year period. What they don't get here, the firearms, bloodborne pathogens, those yearly mandates, they get there. And that could be police and the law, it could be penal code, but these are all areas that they have to have a certain amount of training. But it's not necessarily every year. It's during that 3-year period that they have to have it.
Is any of this online in terms of training?
None of our training is online.
So they just don't prepare modules in that way, is that it?
No,
So
they
you
don't.
have to have an instructor?
No. They do a lot of training up at the academy also, but the academy is getting very expensive now because they charge for all the training. So if I want to send an officer up there just for a legal update, it's going to be a minimum of $50 to send them for a day's class. Plus I've got to pay them for the overtime. Where at this particular training that we're providing the officers right now, there's no cost to the training. It's all organized through South Central Criminal Justice. Free instructors come in and train the train. It's usually at an independent location. Could be the Milford Academy, could be Bridgeport, could be Waterbury. They move around to try to accommodate the area, the South Central area police departments. But right now, there's actually no cost to that other than the overtime to send the officers. But we sent, I think it was 3 or 4 officers at their regular pay, for Monday through Friday last week. And even in that constitutes some overtime, if we can't adjust them. But that's a line that I had to go up on. 51,800, uniform allowance. Right this year is a prime example where we have 3 officers in the academy right now. It's a cost of about $3,500 per officer to outfit him. That would be for his uniforms to go to the academy, his uniforms when he gets back and gets put on the road. So it's about could run him to like $3,600. You multiply that by 3 right now, and we're up over $10,000. If you take that and you figure in replacement of bulletproof vests, and what's also in that line is a mandatory contractual obligation to $925 a year to each officer, full-time officer, for clothing allowance, for maintenance on their uniforms. So it doesn't leave a lot left over. So I really had to be honest, and I had to increase that line. I mean, because we have to replace the vests, we have to give them their, their clothing allowance. And going into next fiscal year, we have 7 officers that can leave the department. We've already got notification that there's a possibility of 2 of them, or they will be going within that next fiscal year. So that cost is going to be generated. Going down to 53,510, repair and maintenance on machinery. This is non-structural equipment that's in the department that we maintain. Could be printers, could be just about anything in the building. That 53,520, repair and maintenance, that's the maintenance on the vehicles. 53,530, maintenance on the buildings. All of those lines went up only for the mere fact of it's cost. Our contracts with companies out there, whether it be working with Crest or Ford or Brantford or anything that they supply us with equipment, costs have gone up, and I think if you look at it, you can see that it's very minimal. It's just the cost of doing business. Sometimes it's only about a 3% increase in that particular line. I just wanted to note that I try to every year. Obviously, we have contractual obligations. My projected for this year is $2,846,165. 498 is operational out of that. So there's a big difference. 2,555,666 that's actually contractual. I have no control over that at all. And when I figured it out to my request, when you basically take out the almost $10,000 that we spend for the electrical, for the repeater that hasn't been moved yet, there's really only somewhat of an increase of just over $1,000. But then we go into communications telephone. I add up the actual requirements of the bills that we have to pay, whether it be the T1 lines and our regular phone responsibilities. It comes to about $28,000 and change, and I do not have a contract with AT&T. Each year to year, about nine years ago, because a contract would probably cost me about $8,000 or $9,000. We have a very aging telephone system in the department, but I have a little bit of a buffer of about $2,000. So if we have to replace any phones or anything, which we have in the past, they do break, that I can cover that. But again, just a reminder that I do not have a contract on that. Communication cell phones, that went up. It's technology. I have 4 officers, plus myself and the chief. We have smartphones now. I think in past budget presentations I've explained to you, that's for command level, that's the way to go now. I mean, you get to a bank robbery, you get to a scene, you get to anything out there. Before I get there, before the chiefs get there, before command level people get there, that picture can be sent right to that supervisor that's on his way to the scene or has to make a decision before he even leaves his home. So that's part of doing business, and that's why the increase is there. Dues went up 54,620, only for the mere fact of dues is going up, and a lot of the things that we have to pay dues for. Computers, I only increased $200, 55,111, and then hopefully we'll have the reduction in the electric streetlights, which is that repeater relocation, which I have to pay the maintenance fee, it comes out of our budget, pay the maintenance fee. That always looks a little bit different when I show projected and it's over $9,000. Well, I only actually budget for 2 for that line. I never budget for what it's going to cost for the rent for the present location. I mean, I think the only other area that I would like to discuss is in our contractual obligations and going into the next fiscal year, the request for the additional officer, if there's any questions on that. I'm sorry, for the additional officer?
Additional officer.
Chief, I have a question. How much, I guess I'm asking you to speculate, but how much do you think an additional officer might cut into the request for overtime?
For overtime?
If you have increased staffing, you should have a decreased demand for overtime shifts, am I right?
Exactly. I would hope that would decrease it. I mean, one of our accomplishments this past year is, in fact, having Officer Lynch at the Beecher Road School. That is one of our accomplishments. But with that accomplishment, we had to lose something, and that's what I'm bringing here to you today. I mean, it's just we lost that extra officer that was actually a patrol officer that would have put that one extra officer on the road. I mean, historically for police departments, not just Woodbridge, we struggle a lot. All right. Most of the departments in the area are not fully staffed. I mean, can you imagine how overtime is? I know that there's probably 20, 30 officers in New Haven. I mean, I don't know the exact number, but I would imagine it's up there, if not more. How that affects overtime. Is it a large amount? No. As far as the effects of how it would offset overtime having an extra officer, but it would. But that's the dilemma we're at right now. We've taken an officer that was that extra officer on the patrol, that would have been there, and there's a lot of factors, and we discussed it today. There's a lot of factors associated with that. Officers taking sick time, officers, being off on injury. We're a small department. When we have to deal with things, it's quick, it's decisive, and there's not a lot of officers around. If you watch Cops, you can see that, a lot of times when they're making arrests, you got 4 or 5 officers. We're lucky if we have 2 officers when we have to make a physical arrest. So sometimes that's why an officer gets hurt. Officer gets hurt, we're down another officer. I've truthfully looked at the staffing, and I shared that with the administration today, that it's difficult for me to ask for another officer with the staffing that we have. But we're historically always down. We don't have that full staffing that we should. It brings down the morale of the officers because, trust me, and I feel for them every day because going through the holidays, I dealt with it because I was taking calls because almost every night right now, granted, we're down 5 officers, all right? And in my 25 years on this department, there's been very few times that we have been full staffed. We went from 25 to 26 officers back in, I believe it was 1998 or 99, when we put an SRO in the high school. At that time, they did hire an additional officer to offset that. They saw at that time that there was a need to offset. We took an officer right out of patrol, where he was actually a sergeant at the time, and put in, and we hired back then. Same principle now. You take that extra officer out, whether we're at full staff or we're down officers, it's going to affect us.
If you're down 5 officers right now, what good is it adding another officer until you fill those positions? And then can look at whether or not you really need the staffing.
It's a good question, and we discussed that today. But if you take that, what good is that one officer going to be? Now, I just told you that we're down 5 officers.
Right.
All right? It's going to be another 6 to 8 months before we get 3 of them back. I don't know when the injured officers will be back. We have 3 people in the academy right now. We have 2 out and injured. I have no idea when the injured parties are going to come back. I do know when we will be able to, and it probably won't be until October or November of next year. They go to 27 weeks of the academy. They have almost 400 hours of FTO, field training officer, while they're on the road, and then they get cut loose. So there's a long period of time. By that time, I know we're going to be down one more officer. And then I know that another officer that's planning on leaving is, and I'm just saying, I'm not for sure that he's going to leave, but he's going to leave. So now we're down 2 again. So to answer your question, what will that extra officer is? Well, we'll have him. He'll be there, and he will offset that shortage that we're constantly trying to fill. I mean, if I said, I would have, the point I was making, if I sat here and 100% of the time we were at 26 officers, I would say it's going to be very difficult for me to ask for another officer. But that's not the way police departments work. And I know for a fact that most of the police departments in the state are always understaffed. We always do more with less. Back in 2002, we were required to do a study. I was part of it. I went to South Central Criminal Justice, and they conducted a study of 18 departments. And the question was, do we need any more people in this department? That study, and I have it here, recommended 2 more officers. Only for the mere fact is that you are down officers most of the time. We have a lot of responsibilities that are outside that patrol responsibility, whether it be DWI patrols, taking part with Orange in the state police in a tri-state regional traffic squad. These are things that we have to, if we're going to be part of that, we have to provide officers to be part of it. And that's, and if we're down to 2, I could never let it. And in the condition we're in right now, I could never let officers go to another town, or even to work with those 2 other agencies within our town. I don't have the manpower. We're running right now with probably 90% of the time, there's only 2 officers on the road. There's only 2 officers on the road tonight.
So I guess where I have some of the disconnect is that you want an additional officer, but yet there's an increase in shift differential, in holiday pay, in overtime. And it seems to me that there should be, some meeting of the minds.
The increase,
Yeah.
and let me, can I just take one of the lines?
Yeah,
just
sure,
so
absolutely.
let's take college incentive, because that's what we talked about today when I went over it with Tony. So you take college incentive. Now, 2 of the officers that just left didn't get anything for college. They didn't have any college education. The 2 officers that I'm going to replace, that's in your budget, do I ask for college money or do I not? I asked for it because I'm asking for what is 100%. Now, I know the 2 officers that we just in fact did hire, or all 3 of them are college. And for contract, our officers get 8% of their base salary for a bachelor's degree, and they get 4% for an associate's degree. But when I do the budget and I have absences of people, I go and I give Tony a spreadsheet that shows 100% of what it would cost. He'll adjust that later on if, in fact, I hire 2 officers that don't have any college. So that request that I'm putting in there is going to be significantly lower. And that's why it was significantly lower in my projection. Does that make sense?
No. No. I know, and
I'm sorry.
I hear a level of what you're saying, and I'm focusing on what Sandy's question is, and maybe this is the same question. What I'm trying to understand, right, does this budget across the board reflect staffing for 26 officers, whether they're there or not, or 27 officers?
27.
Whether they're there or not.
I'm sorry, 27.
And yet, in response to Lawrence's question, you said that the overtime had not been adjusted. You hadn't followed that logic through to the overtime, so that would be a reduced number if in fact you had that additional officer.
That I know. Oh, I never even computed that in there.
Right. Well, I guess that's the question
Yeah.
that I'm having is what else has not been computed at the increased staffing? It seems like there's a little bit of to use your word, a little bit of a disconnect.
Okay, no, I could see the point there.
Okay.
I could see the point
So
where.
maybe
where-
we need some tweaking, maybe to understand that a little bit?
Well, a lot of that tweaking is done afterwards by Tony, correct?
When I review this, I'll,
Right, well, understand that maybe it's just me.
No, it's not just John.
Okay, it's not, okay.
No, but basically,
Thank you.
right.
But I understand what you're saying about staffing. That part is, I understand.
Okay.
Ray has covered himself. He's understands that, your budget is going to get reviewed and going to get put back, and you have made some adjustments for that.
Correct.
Okay, so we get it. So, but part problem I have is that even if you put a new one on now, you're not 27 weeks. You could be not 27 weeks away. You're a long way away since you don't have somebody selected. I mean, this person you're talking about, well, is not going to be available. May not be available for months.
It won't be available and probably until after January of next year.
January next.
So to answer your question,
next
it's
year.
not going to affect the overtime for that year. It won't, because I won't have if you authorize me to hire an officer for July 1, he's going to go through 27 weeks of the academy. If we're lucky to get him in the academy on July 1, and he probably won't be till March of 2015.
You're talking about 7 potential retirements, July 1? You said you're, well, not July 1, but you said this year there's 7 potential officers
no, they're eligible.
That are
that
eligible.
are eligible. So we don't know what that looks like.
Oh, you don't want them.
I don't
Trust me,
wanna
you
know?
don't want them.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry. I shouldn't say that.
Well, I guess my point is, it sounds like it's very fluid.
Pardon?
It sounds like it's a very fluid situation.
Yes.
And, okay, and I'm not getting the sense that this budget is responsive to that. Maybe,
Well, I think it is,
Okay, okay.
because in talking to my board, I budget at 100%. I don't budget where,
Okay.
well, maybe it's only 2/3 of that I'm going to have to worry about. I budget the spreadsheet that I afforded you, and I go over with Tony. It's at 100%.
Okay.
I mean, if I wouldn't feel comfortable coming in with saying, well, to cover college, it's going to cost $100,000, and I says, well, we're only going to ask for 80, and we'll see where we go from there.
So in terms of the holiday pay, it's up by $20,000. We have the same number of holidays every year. Are there more for some reason?
Are you
that's-
counting Festivus? We have to celebrate Festivus for the rest
So,
of us.
I mean, that's what I,
There's an extra officer.
There's an extra officer in
When you
there.
add an extra officer, you have to
There's an
not
extra
only add
officer.
salary, you have to add holiday pay, you have to add college incentives. I mean, there's several
What is
accounts.
it called?
that-
college
We're
incentives I
adding
can
27.
understand, but holiday pay, it's based on the number of people who are covering.
But he's
No.
going
No,
back
it's not.
and adding
What?
that
No, it's
extra
not.
officer, that's part of the budget that has been
But you have the
adjusted.
same
That's
number,
not-
you have the
Officers-
same
The
number of officers on Christmas Day.
That's not how-
or
it's not how-
Thanksgiving.
that's not how
No,
holiday-
you don't.
That's not how holiday pay works.
No, the holiday doesn't pay.
Because officers are on a
that's the whole thing.
4-3-4-3
They're still getting
schedule.
it.
If they're not working the holiday, it's their normal day off.
Yeah.
If they are working the holiday, then they get paid for the holiday.
So he's still getting.
So what budget do I present to you? Them not working or them working?
Okay.
I'm starting
So
to
that's
grasp
kind of
where
way
you're
I do
going.
it.
All right, okay, thank you.
And then that's where Tony comes in. He adjusts it if it needs to be adjusted.
Ray, I have a couple questions for you, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Can you go back again? We'll hate to keep going back to overtime, but
No, that's good.
you did start the presentation by saying there were a few reasons that you reduced it from 140 to 100. In that logic, was any of that the thought of the fact that an additional officer was going to help you bring it down, or that's strictly based on other factors?
No. In answer to, I didn't take that into account at all.
So
Only
no-
for the mere
no
fact
part
that he's
of
not going to be around. I mean, unless you authorized him today.
So we can see a savings there if there was an additional
If there's an additional officer.
Okay. And then the second question I have is, based on the size of our town, the size of our force, we seem to be a larger force per capita than other small towns around. Do you have any type of figures on that, compared to towns similar size? I mean, you said you had a report that I've never seen, but that gives you the idea that maybe you are short an officer or two. Does that report also include other towns in
Yes, it
comparison
did.
to?
He incorporated I can list the towns if you like. I mean, he.
No,
he
but is that a
Thanks for
report
bringing
that we
the
can
copy
see
of
that? Yeah, that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Is that
I
a
can give him
report we
copy.
can get a
That's
look at?
something that we should be seeing.
Yeah, that'd be
So if we
great.
can get a copy, that'd be great.
That'd be great. Thank you.
I just have a clarification. What you mentioned before that you had no control within this budget, and I believe you were referring to the salaries, right?
Contractual
The
obligations.
contractual, so
yes.
that's basically the
Correct.
personnel and the salaries, right? So we're talking about the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Basically the first 5 line items or 6 line
No,
items?
you're talking all the way down to 51,800.
51.
At 51,800, you're talking about 2,555,667 projected.
I got 2,147,637 just in the police chief, deputy police chief, lieutenant, regular clerical, police officers, and dispatchers. Right there, 2,147,637.
That's
So
I don't
that-
have them individually, but that's probably
Yeah, well, I
right.
added up.
Yeah.
So I just want to be clear. So that's at full force. So that's 27 officers in there,
Correct.
correct?
Mhm.
Okay. So a chief, a deputy, a lieutenant, and 27 officers is all included.
Yeah, I mean, the quote that I was is everything that is contractual that I.
I understand you don't control that, other than the numbers of the people that are in those slots. But if they're there, you don't control it because it's. I understand.
So I was just going to say, to my point, I think why it's so important we discuss and get the numbers straightened out. If everything's based on 26, 27, is unlike most departments, or your budget is 90% of its salary, and some are 70, some are 80. So obviously you're one of the higher where it's basically salary. So your numbers are so affected based on how many officers that I'm just trying to get clarified on some of these numbers. It sounds like some you did account for that other officer and some you didn't. So maybe it would help us or it would help me if it was a little more in line with every number reflecting the same amount, 27 officers.
This is.
This
This
is
is
except
27
for a couple
officers.
of things like overtime that wasn't contemplated and a few others. So I guess it would help me to understand better how much of a percentage we may be talking about. Overtime would be reduced to Lawrence's point, or a few other issues that may have a reduction based on the additional officer. It seems like we have the additional costs here of the officer, but not maybe the additional benefits that would reduce some costs, which might help your budget, or at least help me to see your budget better.
May.
And I think this is related. So what is the actual cost of the new officer when you look across all the line items, ballpark,
You want
in
to
terms of the salary?
Tony has that. 88,000, something like that.
question, so I prepared it. It's 88,331. That includes health benefits. That includes retirement benefits. Some items that are in the benefits department that are not in the police department. That includes holiday pay and college incentives. The whole bit.
Right, so to my point, that gives us an idea of how much it costs us.
Correct.
And I'd like to see what benefits as far as reducing the amount of overtime and that type of thing, where the 90 may actually come down because if we're spending, if he saves us 25,000 on overtime, 90 really becomes 65 and so on and so forth. So that's what I'm trying to figure out is what an actual officer costs us, our bottom line. That's what he receives. But if it reduces some of the overtime and some of these other expenditures based on overtime, it might make me feel better, at least a better grasp of the numbers, because a 90 may actually be 60 or so on.
No, absolutely.
Thank
As
you.
far as the SRO, and the EMD and the DARE officer, if there's an emergency, I'm assuming they're not new to those positions, right?
Oh no,
They take
they've
off.
been out.
Okay. So they're
Uh,
not, while they're there, they're also available for, if there's 2 accidents and you've got 2 officers on one, they can certainly leave where they're at. And I know at the Amity they say when the kids get there in the morning and when they leave in the afternoon, that's the most important time for the SRO. So they're on call.
They're available when they're working, obviously.
Any other questions?
What's the name of that report, so when I email you tomorrow, I know what to say?
Oh, here we go. Management and staffing was prepared by the South Central Criminal Justice Administration in 2002. Yeah, I just make a copy and I'll,
Have it here Tuesday night.
Oh, okay.
Just hand it to us Tuesday night.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
good.
Okay, thank you.